Hi, friends. I'm Ruba Bird. I'm here in the meeting house at Eugene Friends Church. I'm the pastor here. And because we can't meet in person together during Holy Week, which starts today, Palm Sunday, I've decided to share a few thoughts each day and post them where you can find them so that we at least have this way to travel through this week, this last week of Jesus' life on earth together. What a roller coaster week. The celebration, the triumphal entry into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, and then all of the different things that the Gospels tell us Jesus did and said, the things he taught, the time he spent with people, and then those almost unbelievably difficult days from the Last Supper with his followers, with his friends, through his death, his crucifixion, his burial, the confusion of the people that had been with him, and then, and then the miracle of resurrection Sunday morning. What I'm going to share today, I think it will be about 10 minutes, is I want to read some more from the sermon by Katie Cook, a dear friend of mine from college days, who is a minister, who is also the publisher of Seeds of Hope magazine. And I've been really challenged and moved by her reflection on Palm Sunday that I'll read to you. I'm just reading some excerpts, and most of the words are hers, a few transitional sentences of mine for the flow. Let's listen together to this perhaps new way of looking at Palm Sunday. Jesus and the Feast of Fools. In medieval times, on the first day of January, folks in Europe celebrated what came to be known as the Feast of Fools. Clergy and townspeople who were normally circumspect would dress in costumes and masks and engage in a frolic that was sometimes burlesque. The social order would be turned upside down. The person who held the lowest status in town would be named king or duke, and often a child would take the place of the highest ranking religious leader. Historians tell us that the people of the ruling classes avoided the Feast of Fools because the celebration exposed the obvious difference of power and resources between rich and poor. When we look closely at how Jesus seems to have operated his public career, we can see things that must have seemed absurd to the people around him, who were expecting God to send them a very different kind of Messiah. Jesus chose a motley group of peasants and social outcasts as his ministry team. He constantly criticized the in crowd and the upwardly mobile while championing the down and out. His whole ministry looks kind of like a parody of a messianic campaign, including his triumphal entry into the city of Jerusalem less than a week before his death. That Jesus chose to enter Jerusalem on a donkey shows that he was trying to make a point. But what was that point? He was not dressed as a warrior or any kind of ruler. He was not accompanied by an army. He was riding a colt, a young donkey, instead of a war horse. He had told stories on the way to this city about an upside down kingdom. Now he was acting like an upside down king. What does this story from Jesus' last days on earth have to show us? Maybe more than we realize. In Jesus' first century world, there was a large gap between those who were quite wealthy and those who were quite poor. In the US today, the richest 10% of Americans own 70% of the net wealth in this country. White households own 85.5% of America's net wealth. Black and Hispanic households together own about 8%. This gap continues to grow at an alarming rate. In Jesus' day, a group of legalistic religious leaders had seized control of the Jewish culture and used their rules as weapons against those with no voice. In our day, fundamentalists, even militarists, from almost every religion in the world seem to be wreaking similar havoc. In Jesus' day, the Hebrew people were expecting a political leader, a military leader to rise up, a leader chosen of God who would deliver them by crushing the opposition. Many in the U.S., even among those who proclaim Jesus' name, would also prefer this kind of leader. Jesus refused to conform to the expectations of the people. He chose to travel around hanging out with riffraff, healing and feeding people, and preaching about peace. The reign of God, the rule of God, which he spoke about, was crazy, topsy-turvy. His entry into the city of Jerusalem, his royal forefathers, was an absurd parade. His whole ministry was like a feast of fools. Whoever was in power should be out of power, he said. Whoever is up should be down. Whoever is first will be last. He spoke out candidly against the religious establishment of Israel. He condemned their hypocrisy and greed. In our world, too, there is considerable hypocrisy and greed. There's economic injustice foisted on the poor by the wealthy and powerful. There are those who raise themselves above others, electing themselves to be the judges of who is socially acceptable, who is morally acceptable, and who is not. People are marginalized even within our churches because of an infinite number of things. They're different in some way. Maybe they were born different. Maybe they've made mistakes. Maybe they're just without resources. If we think about it, we'll remember that Jesus would probably have embraced those marginalized folks. And sometimes we have a sneaking suspicion that he might not be too thrilled with us. But it takes a lot of courage to act in loving ways toward people who are different. It takes even more courage to stand up for them in the face of powerful authority or self-righteous hatred. But friends, we are called, you and I, by this King, Jesus, who rode into the town of his death on the back of a donkey to seek out, we're called to seek out marginalized folks, to do something that doesn't make sense, to find a way, listening to the voice of the Spirit as our guide, to turn something or things in our world upside down. Right now, this community is engaged in a process of discernment. We are having conversations, large groups, small groups, looking at resources, looking into our own lives and histories to see how it is that God, that the Spirit of Christ is leading us right now at this time and place to respond to issues of systemic racism, marginalization, big word, all of the injustices, all of the hidden, built in structures that keep some people out and make it look like some people are in. There are all kinds of ways that people don't feel included, don't feel listened to, don't feel that they belong. Some of that falls along the lines of what we can see on the outside. Some of that happens in a way that's more hidden. Topsy-turvy, upside down. Last shall be first. I'm really glad that we don't have to go through the process of looking at ourselves, looking at our structures, at our world, our culture, our insides, our families, all by ourselves. We have each other, but mostly we have our friend Jesus, who continually calls us into joy, into healing. Let's see how this week opens up some new ways of being Jesus people together.